How's the experience been with TPUSA and its Dartmouth chapter so far? How big's the membership? And then, we're also interested in knowing like what's been done and what's been planned as far as campus presentations or debates, and what have the meetings been like?
Of course. And so, just for context, Turning Point, Dartmouth doesn't keep an official membership roster. We just kind of look at who shows up. And thus far, while we were officially formed last spring, our first real major event was this past fall.
Mhm.
And we hosted a debate with kind of conservative political commentator Will Witt. And we hosted it over in the Rockefeller Center. And we had, I mean, probably around 80 to 100 people there. Some friendly, some a little less than friendly.
Okay,
Uh,
that's
but
okay, right?
consistently, we also host a kind of weekly, bi-weekly, kind of depending on the term, discussion meeting where we have people show up, we'll throw out a topic and just have kind of a big conversation about it. Um, Sometimes it's depending on the, shall we say, aggressiveness of the topic, we'll have a discussion leader. Sometimes it's just we'll go around the table and kind of talk through people's opinions on it. And so, people that would probably actively call themselves a member of Turning Point at Dartmouth, probably 25, give or take. And
Good size.
um, sorry?
So that's good size.
Yeah, it's a pretty good size, especially for not only the first chapter in the Ivy League, but probably the most active chapter, given kind of the actions of the other chapters in the Ivy League universe. Um, And so we kind of run those in parallel. We run the like speaker series. We have a couple kind of in the pipeline for the end of this term, the beginning of spring term, and then we're going to continue to run our kind of weekly to bi-weekly debate series.
Mhm.
We had a really fantastic conversation, probably week two, around the actions of ICE, and we sent a campus-wide email as a lot of people are familiar. That's kind of how club organizations are run and how meetings are advertised. And we had over 50 to 60 people there. Some were people not entirely friendly at all to the mission of Turning Point, but the debate was 95% a true conversation between people and an exchange of ideas. There was a couple of times I was fortunate enough to moderate the debate between the students that showed up, and there was only one or two times that I had to say like let's have some respect. Like you got your time to speak. Let's let this person who disagrees with you have their time.
Have you thought about doing something fun like Charlie Kirk's Roundtable where students can debate other students? Dartmouth Dialogues could be the moderator. I bet there would be a great audience of students who might want to watch and or participate.
That's kind of how we do our
Yeah.
weekly meetings. Our weekly meetings are really, we tend to book rooms that have specifically the table all around the room to do kind of a round table type of format, depending on the attendance that we're expecting. We really want people to get the practice. I think especially because of the rise of phones and social media, people struggle, and I've seen this with my peers. I've seen my own uncomfortability come up at times where to look each other in the eyes and to defend what you think um it's a largely lost art. And so to give people the chance to hear people and to look in the eyes of somebody that they disagree with, or even that they do, even agree with parts of it, and then also for the speakers or for people who raise their hand and kind of want to ask questions or engage, we provide those chances because I think it's a skill, not only first and foremost, but I also think the chance to stand in front of people and look at people that you disagree with, I think is one of the most important skills going into especially the workforce today and just the general world that we live in, where you have to know how to talk to people and not everybody's going to agree with you.
So, when we were going through some of our prep for this conversation, Vito mentioned he was at the AmFest conference in December. So I'm going to direct this to him for his sort of bird's eye view of what he thinks going on. That's a unique vantage point, and we welcome the opportunity to hear your thoughts on the internal dissent that was highlighted in the media reporting at the event. And, our question really is there room within TPUSA for internal disagreement, or is the goal primarily message discipline? And then are there any issues on which disagreements feel discouraged or constrained, even within a free speech oriented group like TPUSA?
Well, I would have said in a heartbeat, yes, absolutely, there is room for internal debate. Think of how even as conservatives, we debate protectionism and free trade, isolationism versus foreign involvement, just generally whether we should be pro or anti-Israel. I think those are all things that we aren't, as a movement, completely set on. A lot of like the protectionism, isolationism, that's kind of more of what I think the average Turning Point student believes, but it's not all of it, all of us, and might not even be me, right? So like debating among the left is important because, when we do that, we platform our ideas and we try and, win a debate. Debate among ourselves is also generally very important because we get to come out with, as a movement, what do we want to promote? What are the top ideas of our movement that we want to
Sure.
and take to the stage against left, right?
And that sort of reminds me of a question I had when you mentioned your ICE discussion. Were there folks from the TPUSA chapter or active members who were sort of taking different sides or different nuanced positions on ICE's activity?
You want to take that?
Yeah. On the ICE discussion, there was kind of a level. Nobody was, well, virtually nobody in the chapter was fully behind ICE. Everybody kind of had varying degrees of like, we support immigration enforcement, but yeah, we support immigration enforcement, but how far is too far? And they were kind of debating where that line sat. And because it was an open to campus discussion, we had some internal or external voices that had questions about like is opposing immigration because it's a crime, like, and they were debating the definition of versus a lawful crime versus a moral crime, all sorts of issues like that. But among the traditional TPUSA members, it was really just debating kind of where it was closer to splitting hairs on how far is too far, like how far is, the rule of law versus kind of an overreach of executive power.
Fantastic. So sounds like there is room for different views even within TPUSA at a campus-wide discussion.
Even on our exec board, there's differences. Like we love the chance to sit around and, just argue with each other and and to have a very constructive conversation about where we want to go as a society, where, what policy change that we want to see. Ideological homogeneity is not something that really exists among our membership, and I think that is exactly where we want to be.
Fantastic. And you mentioned morality a moment ago versus sort of what the law might say. How should a free speech organization manage viewpoints that may conflict with deeply held ethical and or religious beliefs at all? I know that TPUSA has some Christian roots to it, and curious how that sort of thread works its way through the interactions that you have at TPUSA.
Well, like I said earlier, I would say that when we're hosting a speaking event like Will Witt, right? We're not going to bring Will Witt to campus if he believes that. I'm going to give an example, I guess, but that men should be competing in women's sports. I'm sorry, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But if there is a person, right. Our goal, let's say he was talking on why biological men shouldn't be competing in women's sports. It's kind of a controversial topic these days. But if we were to bring him to campus, obviously he would hold our viewpoints, but we're not scared of those who hold viewpoints that conflict deeply with our, ethical whatever commitments, because at the same time, when we hosted Will Witt, who certainly believes that, half of our discussion, I think that would have been 30 minutes, maybe more, was a Q&A. It was an interaction between the audience, which I can tell you a lot of people in that audience would have believed the opposite,
right.
Will Witt. So obviously, it goes kind of without saying that we wouldn't promote ideas that are deeply, opposite to us. But at the same time, we're not afraid of those ideas. I mean, certainly, we're not trying to hide from them, and we don't gain anything from
Perfect.
that either, right?
Probably half of the events that we host, all of the major speakers that we host, and then probably about half of the internal kind of debates and discussions are open to campus, maybe actually even more than half, depending on kind of the topics that we're debating on. We really welcome and love the disagreement and the chance to engage with not only conservatives, moderates, even like pretty substantially liberal people, to have the chance and like debate and to split hairs and to try to figure out exactly where people land and hear from all sides of the issue.
Next one is about TPUSA being characterized as a Christian organization. Do members of other religions whose socio-political views coincide with those of TPUSA find a place within TPUSA? I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'll let one of you.
I guess I could speak
Yeah.
to it a little bit, and then maybe you could add on, Haley.
Yeah.
I guess when we went to AmpFest, they had a Jewish dinner. There are a lot of Jewish students in both the conservative movement and in Turning Point USA, as well as students of other religions, of course, too. I think that the reason we're considered kind of a Christian organization, which we are, um, it really goes back to like the Judeo-Christian values, and Charlie Kirk, emphasized the West, traditions of the West, and how family is important, and how all of our, liberties come from uh, Christian roots as well as Western values. So it's all very interconnected. I don't think that inherently that means that we aren't welcoming of people who don't recognize Jesus, like the Jewish people, but they're still very much involved in our mission, and our mission is not that much different, other than the fact that there's this little aspect that says, "Hey, let's preach the gospel as well." Um, I, do you have anything to add, or is that kind of?
Yeah, largely. There is a chance for people who have different religious perspective to be involved at Dartmouth. There's a really big religious community at Dartmouth. The Catholic Student Center welcomes largely like many people of kind of all flavors of Christianity. Even like I know some people who identify as atheists that go. And then there's a very massive Jewish community at Dartmouth. And so both of those groups of people have the chance to get involved, and but that largely has remained separate from a lot of the political organizations, which is something we're actively trying to think about and work through, as an organization to think about if we want to kind of engage the religious groups.
We'd like to move on to the campus environment and your guys' experiences at Dartmouth and sort of the climate for political disagreement there. Jim, if you'd like to lead us off on that.
Absolutely. You know what? I think I'd like to start with Ron. We were chatting a little bit before we kicked off the conversation, and he's been at Dartmouth for 23 years. So I'd be really interested in his sort of longer term perspective on, the climate for political disagreement at Dartmouth today and how it's evolved while you've been at the school, and the comfort level of students discussing political issues, and you know love to get your thoughts on that, Ron.
One of the things that in the engineering school, we are encouraged but not forced to include DEI in the classroom. And when President Bylock came out and said part of DEI is diversity of thought, I thought, this is about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, that I would start my first lecture by just saying that I'm a conservative, I believe in God, and I believe the family is the foundation, not a foundation, the foundation of civilization. And I take students to lunch in small groups, and about a week later, a student said to me, she said, "Professor, when I told my roommates that you said you're a conservative, you believe in God, and you believe a family is the foundation of civilization," their chins hit the floor. Not only were they shocked that any professor believes that, but he'd be willing to say it. And I thought, wow, that is really kind of sad. So I decided at that point, this is only about 3 years ago, that if somebody wants to start a Turning Point chapter at Dartmouth, I would be the advisor if they'd ask me to. But I don't think I see that it's changed an awful lot in the negative at Dartmouth. I think we were always a little bit more on the conservative side. But I know in the engineering school, I know a few conservative people, and they tell me that they have been unfriended by people because of their beliefs. And so I think that is the type of thing that can happen. But and I also just think that and this is where it has probably gotten worse. Would a Dartmouth student feel comfortable sharing that he or she voted for President Trump? And I think most, and obviously more than a few have to have voted for him. I think that's kind of sad too, that there just isn't an environment where people would feel comfortable sharing that.
Interesting. And maybe I'll address my next question to Vito. Have you personally or Hailey, have you faced any pushback for your political alignment? Have you lost friends? Are you afraid to tell people that maybe you didn't vote for Trump, but if you did, that that was the way you went in 24?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't think I've lost any friends. Maybe I haven't made some friends I otherwise would have. Maybe some dates went worse than they should have when they found out I was in Turning Point. No, generally speaking, I think that I was just at the David Network Summit this past weekend, and people are talking about how they're scared to speak up in class and this and that.
I'm sorry, which summit was that? I didn't catch that.
It's a conservative summit in DC.
Okay.
Point is, I feel very fortunate in, I guess being the president of this organization and writing for the Dartmouth Review, and I have my own group of friends, and most acquaintances I have don't really care. They don't treat you too much differently, especially if you are very articulate with your thoughts and points. But I don't, obviously I do face pushback, but it's nothing to where I'm scared to speak up or feel that uncomfortable. I mean, obviously we have an anonymous social media app. That's how things work these days, I guess. And, people can say whatever they want about people anonymously, which doesn't always turn out well, especially for me. There'll be once every couple days something, probably, honestly. But I don't care about that. Nobody cares about that. So generally, no, I feel like the political campus here is one that is probably better at this school than many other schools. And I'm so yeah.
Hailey, do you concur?
Pretty closely. I think it's slightly different, and like to acknowledge it's a little bit easier to be a conservative man than a conservative woman. Like there's less of me. And but largely I think in comparison to my friends at peer organizations, I'm sorry, at peer universities, that I have the chance. I'm pretty unapologetically exactly who I am. I'm a very active member of the Dartmouth Review. I'm involved with conservatives and TPUSA. Like, nobody really has to look that hard to figure out what I think. And so like, it's exactly like Vito said, like, maybe I haven't made some friends, but there is a community here for people who think differently than kind of a lot of higher education. I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but that's kind of what it seems like from watching the news and talking to friends at other universities.
Fantastic. That's encouraging information out of Dartmouth from the front lines. It doesn't strike me that either of you lack for self-confidence either, so I'm sure that helps as well, because you're willing to speak up and willing to sort of deal with any potential consequences as well.
Yeah, and Vito, just to say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Just a couple quick comments. First of all, Vito and Hailey don't really need too much help, but I think we should be very grateful for President Bylock. I think the atmosphere that she has created has really made a difference. And the other thing is, so I mentioned I tell these things to my students. I also tell them when we go to lunch, you can ask me any question you want about my political views, and I'll tell you. And for whatever reason, it ends up that because I worked in industry for many years and still have contacts in industry, all they want to talk about is how can I get a job and what are jobs like. So
Exactly.
Maybe
A very quick comment.
Yeah.
What President Bylock is doing to actively support free speech and to support organizations across all aisles, whether it be I can't speak for the Dartmouth Democrats, but everything I've seen from them and like the speaker series there versus the kind of being open to facilitating like a very conservative activist in Will Witt and to like have those conversations across the aisle and to facilitate and like help power an organization like Dartmouth Dialogues, which on its own doesn't do as much as it wants to yet. But to kind of back up organizations across campus that have been really hamstrung for years prior to that initiative and kind of her support behind like let's get every view, like let's get exactly what Professor Lasky was saying, like ideological diversity, has been nothing short of fantastic. Very quick comment.
Yeah.
What President Bylock is doing to actively support free speech and to support organizations across all aisles, whether it be I can't speak for the Dartmouth Democrats, but everything I've seen from them and like the speaker series there versus the kind of being open to facilitating like a very conservative activist in Will Witt and to like have those conversations across the aisle and to facilitate and like help power an organization like Dartmouth Dialogues, which on its own doesn't do as much as it wants to yet. But to kind of back up organizations across campus that have been really hamstrung for years prior to that initiative and kind of her support behind like let's get every view, like let's get exactly what Professor Lasky was saying, like ideological diversity, has been nothing short of fantastic.
I think we should be very grateful for President Bylock. I think the atmosphere that she has created has really made a difference.
We were fortunate enough as an organization just because we really didn't know how the ICE debate was going to go. It could have gone pretty badly. And it's when we sent out the email, I had friends who were like, are you guys sure about this? Like, is this the environment that you want to create? And we were fortunate enough to get an email from what was her office? Dr. Ray's. Yes. So we were fortunate enough to receive the chance to have a facilitator who was trained in the Dialogues Initiative to come and offer to be support in case we needed it. She didn't end up needing to step in, but it was a chance to kind of have some backup just in case things went south, which when you're talking about a topic as present and as aggressive as
It's polarizing for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. And the current situation with ICE, and I was really proud of us and our organization that we didn't end up needing that support, but Dialogues itself was able to kind of back it up and say, like, we're here to support you and to like celebrate like you guys willing to have these hard conversations.
Are there any guidelines that faculty must follow with respect to advocating their own ideological preferences in their interactions with students? If so, what are they and how are they enforced?
No, at least they've never been enforced on me.
You'd probably know.
We have a lot of freedom of as a professor. I think even in places that are very liberal, the official line is you have a lot of academic freedom. So I've never been criticized, whatever. I actually I joined the Republican Club as an advisor about 4 years ago, and I told my dean, who at the time she's a very nice person, I assume she's probably quite liberal, and I thought I should tell her at least, and her response to me was, "Thank you for supporting our students." So, and it's probably, I think the engineering school may be a little different. I think even if the average professor is probably quite a bit on the liberal side, probably not so much as in the humanities. And I think a lot of the professors are so busy on their research and whatever that they don't, at least actively on campus, have much political involvement. But I don't think anybody is in a situation where you've been told, you can't say this or that.
Our last question, and I'll leave this open to any of the three of you. What advice would you give to other students at other schools that maybe aren't quite as supportive of free speech across the political spectrum, who want to engage politically without being consumed by conflict?
I'll take that.
Thanks, Hailey.
My best advice, and kind of the part that comes from at least something close to Vito and I's Dartmouth experience, is that basically every club and organization has public meetings, and few people are, shall we say, poignant enough to tell you to not show up. And my advice is just show up. Like, show up, ask questions. If you want to engage and learn, listen more than you talk. Listen and understand, and then find your moment to like dig in a little bit deeper. Small talk is the enemy of true engagement. And so, of course, a little small talk is necessary every once in a while. But for instance, Harvard's taken the brunt of this, and I know they're making a lot of active changes from everything I hear from people there. But if they have a speaker coming that you may disagree with, or even that you agree with, go and ask hard questions. And the willingness to hear people out and listen and to push a little bit harder is going to be much more appreciated than you standing out there and being like, boo or yay. Like that level of strength and that level of willingness to listen and to show up is appreciated and loved, and that is the small step to making a change to a culture of true conversation and true like openness for debate. That's one thing we've really tried to create at TPUSA at Dartmouth, is we don't exactly really care if you agree with us. Of course, we'd really like more members always. But we want to show up and have hard conversations.
And if I may add real quick, I agree with everything Hailey said. I would say if you do make the decision to get involved, which you should, I'd say as long as you do three things, you'll be okay. I'd say number one, be willing to listen, obviously, keep your ears open, be patient, meaning kind of don't get upset, just keep your composure. If somebody's yelling at you, obviously let them yell. But the third thing is, as long as you're patient, willing to listen, if you're articulate, be articulate, I want to say. Politics is passionate, you might want to scream, no, gun control doesn't work, no, this and that. Like, really think about what it is you believe, figure out why you believe it, figure out maybe how the evidence is on your side, if there's a different perspective you could consider, and then every time you approach a discussion, really know exactly what you want to say. Don't just yell something out, don't just control the passions, and do mental exercises to know what you believe. I don't know. That's kind of my perspective.